Luke chapter 6, verse 27 to 36. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who ill-treat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful.
Great, so my name is Maurice, I'm one of the leaders here. I'm going to help us look at that bit of Luke's Gospel for the next little while. I need this. Okay, so this week for Christian World Nerds, which is not most of you, but people who work in Christian ministry, like me, something has been happening called the Lausanne Congress on World Evangelization, where it's basically that Christians like us, that is Christians who believe the Bible is the authority over everything, we might call that evangelical Christians, lots of them have got together to talk about how is it going bringing the gospel to the whole world. And they've been discussing that and speaking and doing, working out who to work together. And I've been following some of that online, which is a bit of interest to me. And one speaker's research said this, he's from a reputable centre into research mission. £43 billion is spent by evangelical Christians on cross-cultural mission every year. So Christians who believe the Bible give that amount so that other people can hear about Jesus in different cultures every year. But £50 billion is embezzled, that is stolen or collected from people and used for something else or taken by fraud. 50 billion every year, that happens to, from evangelical organisations and churches in the world. And we can't stand back and say, no, not our people. This is our people, our group, our bit of the church. So more is being defrauded than is being spent on reaching people. How on earth can that be true? And someone tweeted that this week in the thing I was following. Loads of people replied saying, how can that be true? But let me tell you how I think it happens, People become Christians, and so they go and work for Christian organisations that involve telling other people how to become Christians. And they are capable people who in the world would be recognised. So everybody I know who's a pastor, I don't suspect any of them of stealing by the way, but everybody I know who's a pastor, all my friends who are pastors or work for Christian organisations, they're very capable people. They'd be highly successful if they chose to do something else. But they are identified with Christ, and they discover that being identified with Christ means that you're not more honoured, but less honoured. Like if you give up being an accountant and for Pricewaterhouse or whatever, and you say, I'm going to be an accountant so unreached people can hear the gospel, you will get less honour and respect and money. And we as people tend to struggle with rejection and people thinking we're strange, and we begin to think, I don't deserve that. That shouldn't have happened to me. And it's a small step from there to saying, I should just keep a little bit of this for myself. Oh, I know that this was given so that people could hear the gospel, but I need a nicer car, a better holiday, more rest. Now, I don't think that's happened here in this church, as far as I know, but it seems to be a huge problem in Bible-believing spaces. And if that is the reason that we feel entitled, because we're shocked to be experiencing more and more exclusion from being identified with Jesus. If that's the reason, well then we're not that much good at believing the Bible. Because Jesus' most basic, first and foremost moral teaching that we read today tells us how to respond to feeling excluded and rejected and hated, and gives us power to do it. And it's not to get a bit of money for yourself. I don't think anyone here is a thief, but you may be angry today, feeling that someone has disrespected you, holding on to anger and vengeance, even though Jesus says being disrespected is just part of the deal if you're a Christian. Or maybe you've come to church today and you have made bad choices this week because you didn't like being rejected or excluded or abnormal. So you did things you know you shouldn't really have done, so you fitted in. Or you're here at church today and you just you've hidden in life from people who aren't Christians because you don't want to be drawn into the way that they behave. And Jesus doesn't give any of those things as options if you're feeling excluded and rejected. If we've been studying Luke's Gospel, life of Jesus, it's clear that Jesus has a particular interest in people who are weak and excluded and unimportant. And when those people trust Jesus, they become important and valued and central to God's work that he's doing in the world, which is amazing. But their experience in the world is probably even more rejection and pushing out than they'd ever experienced before. And so Jesus' first teaching of people following him is about expecting that and dealing with it. And he does not recommend cheating people for money. He doesn't recommend compromising your distinctive behaviour. He doesn't recommend hiding in a Christian bubble. He recommends being merciful as your Father is merciful. Let's think about how that works. Here's the first thing Jesus says: give more than they deserve. We have conversations sometimes in our family like this. Someone says, "What are we doing today?" And someone says, "Oh, we're going to Tesco's." And then someone else who was present for that conversation says, "What are we doing today?" And someone says, "We are going to Tesco's." I think you can guess who's who here from the tone of my voice. And then someone else says, who's been looking out the window or tying their laces or, distracted, says, "And what are we doing today?" And someone else says, "I'm going for some quiet time by myself. I don't know what the rest of you are doing. How many times must I explain what we're doing today?" Now, I love the way Jesus says at the start of this passage, verse 27, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies." As we've said already, it seems like a lot of Christians have not been listening. And I love the way Jesus says, a lot of people are going to try and ignore this. But if you're listening, here are a series of commands which accept that you were probably a lowly person anyway, and if you've become a Christian, you're probably bringing more trouble on your head. What should you do? How should you act when you're experiencing that rejection? Jesus does not say get them back. He doesn't say hide from them. He doesn't say sort out some little perks for yourself. He says do good to the people who persecute you. Bless or do good to those who curse you. Pray for them. If someone treats you badly, he says, don't fight back. If someone steals from you because you're a Christian, give them more than they try to take. Don't withhold good things from people who you think probably don't deserve good things. Rather, give them much, much more than you feel like they deserve. The reality is, if you have become a Christian, you probably started low down in the pecking order, and you probably experienced more trouble since then. If you didn't start low, you're probably in for a bigger fall. This guy on the screen is an actor called Joshua Bassett, a Disney star who identifies himself as part of the LGBT community. And he was baptized a couple of years ago. He put in his social media, he got baptized at a big American megachurch that holds conservative biblical views on sexuality and has brought a lot of trouble on his head from that community for getting baptized there. And some people were cynical there, and he just carried away and, just didn't really understand what he was doing. But I was reading an interview with him this week, and he said this: I spent my entire life seeking truth, trying to find peace, knowing that peace is out there, but not feeling it inside myself, wanting to love and be loved, and most of the people in my life were pretty supportive of that path, until I actually found the peace I was looking for in Jesus. Then I was crazy. And he's experienced campaigns. His previous fans don't want him cast in things anymore. Now, his temptation must be to flip out, to say, listen, if you really loved me, you'd accept this. You know I've been searching for this for years. I've found it. What's your problem? But here's the discipline he's going to need: to love your enemies, to do good to those who hate you, to bless those who curse you. People will insult him. Well, if someone slaps you on one cheek, offer them the other. His apparent fans are going to try and steal his career. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them too. Now, there are difficult, complex questions here, I guess. What about real injustices? Shouldn't we stand up and fight them? And do I really have to give everyone who asks, even people I think will use our money for bad stuff? We can talk about that later if you like. I think sometimes that we're asking those questions to avoid the real call. If you follow Jesus, you need to expect to follow his path of people not respecting you, of missing out on things you could have had if you weren't a Christian. And Christians learn to deal with that by giving people who treat them badly much better than they deserve. Now, mostly, I only see most of you at church. So, I don't know how you're getting on with your enemies. Hopefully your enemies aren't here. They are, that's a whole other sermon. But I hear you talk about the places that you work. And occasionally I get windows in our church life to wonderful examples of people following Jesus in this way. You tell me the stories of a difficult colleague who hassles you about work and faith all the time, and then I go to your wedding and there they are, invited. Or family members who spend all of Christmas picking at your faith and hassling you about going to church, but you return every year with nice presents for everyone and a smile. Or more extreme versions than that. You fled here from a culture that hates your faith, and you're still loving and serving people from that culture. So some amazing examples, but I guess I do observe some things in church that make me wonder how you might be getting on out there with people who actually dislike you being a Christian, if this is the way you act with people who don't mind. Or if you get very irritated at welcoming new people to church, I wonder how you're getting on with loving people who actually hate you, treat you as an enemy. Or if you're nursing a slight in church, someone didn't welcome you or respond in the way that you wanted at church, or the prayers weren't led how you wanted, or you don't like the worship, or any of that. I wonder how you're getting on out there with someone actually doing something unfair to you. I wonder if you're giving them more than they deserve. I wonder if you get very angry or annoyed or irritated or avoidant of the culture we try to have in this church of everybody serving on teams once a month, and that makes you angry. Okay, well, fair enough. But I wonder how you're getting on out there with giving to everybody who asks. I don't know. It's all I see. Now, please don't get me wrong. There's no point doing any of those things to impress me. You'll be very disappointed if you think I'm a good authority on who's doing this well. But if we live in a world that we think it's okay, even amongst Christians, to not love people who aren't very lovable, to not be generous to people who don't deserve it, or we're going to end up cheating or angry or avoiding people who aren't Christians, and that is not following Jesus' basic commands. I find this really hard because I am someone who does go over in my head times I feel like people have offended me. If someone does something I don't think is nice or disrespectful to me, I often can't sleep. So I'm thinking about it, going over and over in my head. How could they have thought that? It's so unfair. Maybe you identify with that. And there are people, I'm sure, in our church family who have big, terrible, awful things that have been done against them, that you're saying, is Jesus really asking that? And yes, he is. He's saying the basic thing Christians do is that they give people more than they deserve. Here's the second thing we see in this passage. Pay the cost they create. This is an artist's impression of a man called, I don't know how to say his name, Boniface. Is that right? Boniface? Don't know. He lived in the 8th century. He was a church person with a big stick. A bishop, that's the word. He was someone who spent his life bringing the gospel to Europe for the first time. Now, these days, Europe is like a very sort of sophisticated place where everybody, sits in the streets and drinks red wine and that type of thing. But in those days, Europe was just people by very violent tribes. And he took the gospel to all of these tribes, and the sort of peace spread throughout Europe because people were believing in Jesus and the culture was transformed. Amazing thing. He had this one tribe he was trying to reach with the gospel, and they kept rejecting him. And eventually he went back for the last time with a group of monks, and they set up a camp. They started teaching people to read and giving medical care. And a group of men pulled up on the beach where they were and got out of their boats and killed him and all of his monks. And he said, as they came towards him with the axes, he said to his men, "Put down your weapons. Christians love their enemies." Now that is an amazing example. We hear that story and we think, what type of person does that? But do you see what Jesus is saying is, today? That's not some sort of supercharged A-level Christianity. That's basic Christian ethics for all of us. It's the start of following Jesus. You see, Jesus says, it's normal to do good to people who are part of your own club, people who are good to you. Maybe someone at church made you your coffee today and you were nice to them. Well done. You were probably also nice to the person in Starbucks. Probably a whole lot of people who aren't Christians are polite to the person in Starbucks. It's not, not a particularly Christian thing to do that. Some people don't even manage to do that, but that's another story. Or maybe you actually articulate things like this. I am a really good friend to people, if they're a good friend to me. I respect people, if they show respect to me. I will give help to someone who is reliable to receive it well. Yeah, I'll give money to someone if I think they'll pay the money back. Well done, you're as moral as a bank. You also take that principle. No, Jesus says, Christians pay the cost that other people create. That's why he uses the lending example, I think. When someone does something wrong against you, there's always a cost to pay. If you do good to someone and they do bad to you, it feels like a loss. Sometimes it's an actual physical thing you lose. You think, well, that person doesn't have anyone to share a house with. They can come and share in our house. You give them the best bedroom. And then they keep you awake all night and smoke weed all day and they never tidy up. There's a cost. Sometimes it's more deeply emotional or psychological. You're doing your best to be kind and patient and generous, but the teachers in school just will not help your struggling child. Or sometimes it's just the loss of pride. You were made to feel or look stupid, or weak, or friendless. That's a cost. Jesus is not saying that's simple, or it doesn't exist, or even that it doesn't matter. He's saying there is a cost, but Christians, we pick up the cost of other people's bad actions. We pay the cost for someone, not because we'll get something back. We don't do good because someone will do good for us. Everybody does that. If you're following Jesus, you will see soon that there is a cost to be paid because of other people's bad actions. And people who follow Jesus choose to pay the cost themselves. You lose the good thing, and they keep it. You lend the money, and it never comes back. Now again, I don't follow anyone in church around. Sometimes I feel like it'd be quite useful if I got little drone cameras, see what you're all up to, but I don't, to be clear. But occasionally I do see real glimpses of this in the lives of people in our church. I want you to know your church leaders who are busy and have very full lives and their own families spend a lot of time pursuing and loving people who really don't want to be pursued and loved. And there's lots of people in our church who open their homes to feed people who visit church. And those people visit church and take a meal and they never come back once. And there's lots of people who are just endlessly patient with very trying work situations. And you can talk about that with each other. So there's lots of this going on. So let me use an example that another church leader gave me, and you can decide whether it applies here. Another church leader was talking to me recently, and he said, we did a day in our church where we tried to recruit people to serve in the church. Big Sunday where we all focused on that. Not my cup of tea really, but it's what they do in their church. And so he said, we interviewed some people about different things they do in church. And someone said, I help with kids' work because it's really fun. Someone else said, I volunteer on Welcome because I like chatting to people. And someone else said, I play music because I love playing music in a band. And he said that. I did all the interviews and I thought to myself, not one person here has said it's right and good and Jesus-like to pick up after other people's kids, even though it was their kids who made the mess. No, it's right and good and Jesus-like to try and speak to people who don't want to talk to you, because that's what Jesus does. It's right and good and Jesus-like to give because you're generous, not because you're sure the church will really be a good investment. And it made me wonder, he said, about how much I'm discipling people in my church to obey Jesus at all when they're not at church. If that's how they even talk about serving here. Most jobs here are not thankless. I mean, maybe you do something in church and no one has thanked you, I apologise. But most of the time you do something here, people thank you, they appreciate it. If they weren't, we do them anyway. But I think mostly people get thanked. But what about out there where that's really, really not the case? He said to me, made me wonder, is this student who's really helping with our kids' work actually the student who out there just hides from their flatmates all the time because they're intimidated and they think they're messy and not very nice? Is this person who really helps with this in church, are they that person who goes to the pub and orders tap water? Is this person who appears to serve in church, are they actually tight with their stuff, unforgiving if things are broken? Do they freeze people out if they don't respect them on their things? He said, I don't know. But the message they keep saying here is, I serve because I get something back. And Jesus says what we are about here as Christians is doing something when there's a cost to you that someone else has created. And unless we get that straight, because you will be pressured or isolated or disliked for being a Christian, so unless we get this right, we're on the path to dishonesty, or the path to compromise, or the path to hiding. My followers, Jesus says, accept the cost of other people doing things wrong. They pay the cost. A few weeks ago, we looked at the guy who came before Jesus, a guy called John the Baptist. Although, as I said, in Luke's Gospel, he doesn't actually baptize anybody, so not very well named. And he preached repentance, a changed life. He said normal things, actually. He said, you should share your stuff if you don't need it. You should stop cheating people. You should stop bullying people. It's like quite basic, normal humanity, John was saying, even though lots of people don't do it. And he says, John, Jesus is going to come with fire and the Holy Spirit. And here Jesus is in this passage bringing the fire. Because he says, not share if you've got a bit extra. Jesus says, accept following me means being on the edge. And then when people treat you on the edge, love them back. Give them more than they deserve. Don't just be honest with people. Generously give them more than they deserve. Don't just share, but pay the cost of other people's wrong behaviour. And this is for normal Christians, Jesus says. These are Jesus' priorities for normal Christians. There are many, many years and examples of Christians not practicing this. Hence we hate serving, we're angry at being disrespected, we compromise, we hide, we hate our enemies on social media, we lie about them, we cheat to get the things we want, we hate being the lowest and the excluded and the weakest. Jesus says it's basic Christianity to be different to that. He just says you will lose out, and this is how you deal with it. But John the Baptist also promised that Jesus would give us the power to change. And Jesus says we can do all of this because you know the merciful Father. I think this morality is good. I actually think it's the only hope there ever is of bringing peace to a troubled world, is this morality. But that is not the reason I'm a Christian. I am not a Christian because I want to give living up to this beautiful ideal, a try. I'm a Christian, and I love being a Christian, because it means that no matter what is going on with me, no matter how much I fight forgiveness, no matter how much I want to hold on to bitterness and grasp rather than share and try to pay people back for what they've done wrong, because of Jesus, God always shows kindness to me. He looks upon me and gives endless help, even though that is so much more than I deserve. I come to him all the time needing mercy. And he loves giving mercy. Oh, it's in his power and his right to punish me, of course it is. But I come knowing because of Jesus, I will receive compassion. No bad thing that happens in my life is God punishing me. All of that is dealt with. All good things I have are generous gifts. That's why I'm a Christian, because he loves showing me mercy, and I love receiving it. Here's something else. The God that does that is not some distant, benevolent king. That's in the parable we saw, the king gives mercy, and then the person gets to run away and be free. But when we receive mercy from God, we discover we're not escaping from him when we trust Jesus, but we get to know him as this dear, loving, generous Father every day, guiding my days, giving me his love, living in his care, as Jesus says, a merciful Father. Here's something else. This week I was with some friends who I really think I could tell anything to, and they would treat me with kindness. They wouldn't seek to punish, but to help me. And being with people like that was life-giving. It was peaceful. Together we were able to share life's difficulties and celebrate and pray. And honestly, when they did that, I came away a little bit more convinced that God is like that. people being merciful makes real to me, reflects, honours, shows the merciful Father who lives in heaven. That's what Jesus says at the end of this passage. He says, if you do it, you will be children of the Most High, which means you will show other people what God is like. What is God like? A Father who is always merciful. So Jesus can call us to this radical life and change us so we live it. He says, enjoy God's mercy. Celebrate and love and experience that you are always receiving compassion and forgiveness from Him that you don't deserve. Become a mercy enjoyer. You will become a mercy giver. Live in a relationship of fatherly care. It won't bother you what else that you lose. God's mercy will melt us to show mercy to other people. If we love mercy, we'll show mercy. You know, me telling you to love your enemies, to pay the cost of other people's wrongs, despite its beauty, even if I say it repeatedly, it's so anti-human nature, none of you will do it. But listen, if you know the beautiful mercy of God for you, if you walk each day in the faithful care of a Heavenly Father, you will long to bring the refreshing water of that mercy to a parched world. And the Holy Spirit can change you. So that's who you become for other people. Child of the Most High. So, today I'm not here to say, first and foremost, try showing mercy. I'm here to say, first and foremost,